Okay, so I guess we can start. Um, Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NotGDC, the non-conference about game development. So I'm glad to see you all here, and I hope you will enjoy the speeches. So that is our schedule for today, and it will not be longer than 3 hours with a short break between it. So, and I guess let's start. We will also have streaming online, so if somebody is not able to come, everything will be recorded and posted online on Twitter and YouTube, as also this worldwide conference. And as you see, the first topic will be Cyberpunk aesthetics. I will be telling you about it. Just a few seconds, I load the presentation. Thanks. Some kind of problem? Подскажешь, где? Okay, thank you. Finally. So I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you have actually heard about Cyberpunk and what is for? Can you raise your hand? Oh, that's quite a lot. That's nice. So you are not here just listening about it for the first time. That's cool. And so, but nevertheless, I'd like to give you some motivation why to listen to this talk. Cyberpunk is a huge setting that is a huge world, a huge universe, and right now it is getting quite popular. And there are like millions, six figures that of viewers, of players that like to see this world implemented in games. And I hope you will be able to make your own games in this setting and probably get also a lot of players. So let's see what it's about. You know, it's very difficult to define cyberpunk. If you Google cyberpunk as a movement, you see a lot of text. They start from some kind of sci-fi dystopia or some diesel punk and so on. So basically fiction in some dystopian world. But that's not all about it. You also see the definition, for example, from Reddit, that is high-tech low life, and basically describing that there are a lot of mega corporations that produce very high-quality technology of the future, and there are a lot of also gangsters on the streets. And the life is actually poor. But the cyberpunk is not all about it. It is impossible to describe the whole universe in just a few words. So I'd like to show you a bit different way of comprehending the universe. So I will try to show you the cyberpunk from the visual side. So we will talk mainly about aesthetics, about what parts of a cyberpunk world you see usually in games, in stories, in science fiction films, and so on. I bet you can see a lot of similarities on these pictures. You know, I guess you know these films. For example, The Ghost in the Shell. It's very popular, and also The Blade Runner. Others there are just some concept arts, but you see the differences a bit, and you see a lot of similarities. And I'd like to name them. Basically, it is very easy to see that Cyberpunk is about cyberware, that people wear a lot of enhancements in the way of some technologies. And so, but it's not all. I have a long list here. So, in fact, Cyberpunk also describes a huge world with the giant skyscrapers, which are built by corporations, and a lot of gangsters on the streets, and a lot of great city nightlife with neon signs, with gangsters on the street, and so on. So, very advanced AI hackers, AR, VR technologies makes also as it can be considered as a separate genre, but it's also used very much in Cyberpunk. And let's see from the history of Cyberpunk how these qualities that you see here developed. So the whole Cyberpunk movement started from this journal. That is a science fiction journal that was quite popular in the 60s and 70s. This journal was about dystopian sci-fi. That was quite a point at the time, if you know that. So, and a lot of writers were publishing small stories in it. And one of the stories was Dylan Droid's dream of electric sheep. So, I don't know if you know the story, but you definitely know the film that was based on the story. That is The Blade Runner, the film that defines the whole cyberpunk movement. It showed the aesthetics. So it showed this nightlife, it showed these skyscrapers, it showed this misty rainy worlds, and the problems of self-identity, of androids, of generally development of technology. And so this whole movement started at that time. Then there was a lot of manga published about cyberpunk. So it became obvious that the cyberpunk aesthetics and the whole movement and problems were close to Japanese society. So that is why Akira, for example, appeared. That is, Akira describes a very dystopian world of political machinations and of outlaws trying to break through. So, and then there is also a Neuromancer, or also the novel written by American writer, but also based in Japan. So it tells us the story about a hacker who is actually trying to defeat an AI. And it is also one of the most conceptual, one of the beginning novels that define cyberpunk. It describes slow life, it describes gangsters, it describes mega corporations. It gives you this definition of neural connectors that connect you through some link to the global network, and this neural hackers that was there was actually a trend for all the cyberpunk, and after that for all the sci-fi movies and games. And then we have Ghost in the Shell that develops on this trend. So it took a lot of things from the previous sci-fi books, stories, and manga, But now it try to talk about a problem of self-identity of people when faced with a huge development of technologies and how disconnected, how lonely people feel with the development of technology. And it was a huge success. So it created a huge universe, which is right now also in development. Yes. And then after that, there was a period of RPG, tabletop games that were based in Cyberpunk universe. It started with Shadowrun. That is a magical sci-fi setting, which is by itself strange and weird, but it was based on D&D rules at first, and then it grew with its own description of the world, where high technologies meet magic. And basically you have all the races like orcs, elves, and so on, with high technology, with this neural interfaces, with AR, VR, with this mechs, and cyberpunk stuffs like rainy, misty worlds. And it was very popular, and right now there are a few PC games. For example, Shadowrun Returns, that is based on the original Shadowrun, and it was also a huge success. And then we come to Cyberpunk 2020. I bet you heard about it, because it is the base for a currently development game, Cyberpunk 2077. And here it actually is the first setting that describes how cyberpunk happened. So what were the conditions for it to appear? And it basically states that because of the socio-economic crisis, the government of USA transferred most of its powers to the mega corporations. So basically gave them the carte blanche for doing anything. Okay. And then the era of PC games appeared. It started with a System Shock. This is a great game that I know that most of you heard about it, and some of you actually played it, and maybe some of you are the fans of currently in development, like 3 projects about System Shock. So it is pretty much based on the Neuromancer setting. And then we have the Deus Ex, the huge franchise that most of the gamers heard and played at least once, which further describes the problems with augmentations and how the society reacts to it. But then, the strange thing happened. Cyberpunk, the popularity of Cyberpunk suddenly falls down. So, and for example, for some of 20 years, nobody actually talks about it. Why so? We can ask this question. And many articles answer it in the way that Cyberpunk worlds became a reality. So we actually got to the point where we have this AR, VR, and we have these cities, we have these skyscrapers, we have basically the mega corporations that define everything. And it was no longer a sci-fi setting. So probably people just lost their interest in it because of that. But that's not that bad. After that, right now, in 2017 till now 2018 and rising, the popularity just goes viral. There are a lot of projects right now based on cyberpunk. It's difficult to tell why. Maybe it's nostalgia for 90s, or maybe it's just that we would like to see the beauty of big cities, and we just like these worlds. That is strange, but that is actually beneficial for us as game developers, because we see this trend, and it is possible for us to get into the stream and to develop games with it, and probably get a huge audience. These are the most recent films. So, how much of you have seen at least one of them? So that is everybody, actually. So I know that you've seen Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell probably, and also the Altered Carbon is a great series about self-identity, as you can interchange your skin and so on. And then we have this upcoming movie that we haven't yet seen, so I can't really tell what it is about. But it definitely has some parts of cyberpunk in it, because of the advanced technology of VR and AR, and in general nostalgia for 90s. And of course, as game developers, would like to see games. This is the great list, actually. So the Deus Ex was rebooted from the Humanity Divided, as I remember. Oh no, this is Mankind Divided, and there was Human Revolution. That was the reboot. Then we have the Ruiner, currently well sold title. We have Observer, we have Valhalla, and so on. There are a lot of upcoming cyberpunk games. So that's actually going into mainstream right now. That is, to my mind, that is the very important point when the topic is not yet on the rise, but still in development. But soon, like in 1 year or 2 years, it will be just viral. So, and we of course have huge hopes for the future. We'd like to see what Cyberpunk 2077 will be about, and we'd like to see it the rebirth of the genre. So, and in this time before these huge games come out, you have actually a lot of time to experiment with your own settings, because right now there are not much of cyberpunk games, but they're coming out. And if you create one, you will definitely be able to tell your story with uses of this world, of these techniques, of this universe. And definitely, as Cyberpunk is right now seeking for its new philosophy, then it's possible for your game to stand out. So I definitely advise you to try it out. So go probably create your games in this universe, at least read about it. I'm really excited, and I'm really hoping to see a lot of these games in the future. Thank you. Anton, how much time do we have? Okay, we have finished like quite early. So, do you have any questions? Maybe comments and so on? Okay, so everything will be published, and if you have any questions or comments, you can message me in Telegram every time. And if you'd like to, for me to post any list of the materials that I used for this presentation, it is also possible. So for you to be able to research a bit of Cyberpunk. So let's start with the next presentation.
Just help me switch it on. Ага.
Сейчас поменяю, наверное, экран, потому что так неудобно. Сейчас.
Стой.
Дай батареи. Отлично. Сейчас.
Можешь снизу, можешь снаружи возьмить.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Vladimir and I'm a would-be game developer and a first-year bachelor student here in Innopolis. Today I want to present a concept of game design lenses to you and talk a bit about game design in general. The most of things I'll be discussing today are taken from that great book, The Art of Game Design, the Book of Lenses by Jess Shell. This is an amazing book for a game designer, and I hope you will understand why after my speech. Let's start with a simple, maybe not simple, but a question. What is game design? What do you think? You all? Somebody?
The art of making fun.
Yes, that's a good definition. But I would like to start with the even most simpler one. The game design is what a game designer does. This is a perfect definition, I think, because it is short, it is simple. The only disadvantage is it is totally uninformative, because we still don't know what is it, what a game designer does. I think that the first thing that comes to one's mind is a game designer makes games. This seems to make sense, but surprisingly it is incorrect. I totally agree with the author of the book that this is not the primary goal of a game designer, because games without players, without people who play them, just meaningless bunches of bits or whatever they consist of. The true goal of a game designer is to create experience and to share this experience with people. It may be for the sake of fun, or you may want to convey some high ideals, or it may relate to some educational matters when it comes to serious games, but it is always experience. Now, all people are different, so one cannot just create a game that will awake the same emotions for every person. In order to cope with the overwhelming complicatedness of this task, yes, this is a very simplified graph of what game designers should take into account when creating a design. So, in order to cope with it, we use tools. You know, tools, just little things that help us to make our life easier, help us to make games. And one of the great examples of tools for a game designer is game design lenses. Oh, sorry, not these lenses. Game design lenses. This. You can see some neat pictures here, but never mind them, they're not important. What is important is a short description of each lens and a list of questions. Actually, this is a whole concept. Every lens is just a short description and list of questions, by answering which you can make your design better. You can improve it, because they include some vital questions for your design. Let's have a look at it in practice, how it works. So the first lens is the lens of freedom. What it basically says is that a player should feel free inside their game, but not too free, because actually every game is a set of constraints. That's how you do them. You come up with the constraints that will lead a player to a place where you want them to go and to do what you want in order to produce some specific experience, specific feelings. But what is funny in the same time, the player should never feel limited, feel constrained, because that will just ruin immersion of a player. And one of the very, very good examples of a game that complies with this lens perfectly is Half-Life. You know, these guys who made this game, they know how to guide you in a place where they want to guide you, making you believe that it is your choice. Sometimes it's just something like a big shiny vertex which looks amazing, so you want to go there and see what's going on there. But sometimes it is something much more subtle. Imagine you run through a long dark corridor with a lot of doors. You believe that there is something behind those doors and you can enter them and look. But unfortunately, a pack of eerie monsters is chasing you, and you see a flash of light somewhere farther. And if you want to stay alive, if you want your character to stay alive, you will bolt to this flash of light and ignore those doors. But deep into your heart, you will know that you could have entered them and see what's there, even if there is actually nothing behind there. This is how magic works. So they make you believe that their world is open, though whole Half-Life series is completely linear. And now we come to a counterexample, to a bad example. I think that we all like so much in video games, invisible walls. I think that it is just a monument for game designers' laziness, because, like in this case, they could have just made the gap between grades smaller, but they decided to put an invisible wall and once again ruin immersion. The player feels like trapped in a small locked box called game instead of being in a huge world of possibilities, which it was supposed to be. The next lens is the lens of transparency. I picked just 3 random lenses and we will look how to apply them. This is the second one. So this lens says that the interface of a game should be as transparent, as unnoticeable as possible, but still convenient and functional. It's a funny thing that actually, though interface is a must, it is something that we don't want to be in our games because it just shades our beautiful game world from the player. Let's have a look at a typical interface in a typical MMORPG. It looks ugly, right? Maybe it is convenient for experienced players, but still it serves more like a door than a window to your beautiful game world. It's an obstacle. You don't want it to be an obstacle. You want it to help player. And how can we do that? How can we save the functionality of this interface? By the way, this is bad. Save the functionality of this interface, but still leave a player inside the game's world. One game have a truly great solution. It's Fallout and Pip-Boy. If somebody doesn't know, the thing is what main character, protagonist, carries on his hand. So technically it's the same interface as on the previous slide, but it is integrated, incorporated inside the game. So the player stays in the game flow. That's what's so great about this thing. Now, the next one, the lens of motivation. I think it is one of the most important lenses because if player does not feel motivated, he or she will just leave. He will drop the game and he will not see all the beautiful things you've prepared for them. So what makes a player motivated? What keeps them inside their game? One of the most captivating game series that I know is Final Fantasy, and let's try to find out what's so great about it. It uses both simple mechanics, like showing you a skill, a great skill, a wonderful skill, but not allowing you to use it right now. letting you know that you will be able to use it somewhere in future. Or you run into a boss, a very strong boss, which you cannot defeat now, which beats you up. So you will want to become stronger and eventually take over the boss. That's a very simple trick, but it works. And when it's integrated in a story, it's very good. But it is not the best thing in Final Fantasy. I think for me, what makes the series a masterpiece is the characters. Because the characters, almost all characters, are like living people. They wake your compassion. You become attached to them, and you become really anxious of how they grow up, how their relationships improve, and what will happen to them. That's what keeps you playing. That will not let a player just leave the game, because he will be interested in what will happen with characters. He already became attached to them, and that is great. And the counterexample is another thing that we adore in video games: grinding. I think it is just a crime in game design, because in Lewis Carroll's book about Alice's adventures, people were decapitated for killing time, and that's what game designers do by grinding. Of course, when it becomes a main activity, to some extent it may be good and interesting, but when it's the main goal of your game, then you just force people to waste their time without achieving anything valuable, and that's awful. Don't do this, promise me, please. That was the last and the third lens, and now you may think, okay, grinding is bad, Fallout is good, we already knew it, it's obvious, why is he staying here and telling us that? And who on the earth was that guy who came up with an idea to call these obvious things game design lenses? Who was he? Captain Obvious? Well, what I can say is that though these lenses mostly are very basic and simple, and you can easily figure out them by your great mind, they are almost all vital to a game. And if you read the book and try to imagine a game without some of these lenses, without application of some of these lenses, you will see that this game will annoy players with some mechanics. Because players are weird creatures. You can miss just some little details, like animations or plot from your game, and they will be outraged. And so there's a lot of things you should keep in mind. Let's look at the list of these things, which are vital to a game design and which should be in your game design, lest it fail. Okay, so here we have a dozen of them. It's not many. We can memorize it. And there is another dozen. And there is actually another 100 of them. So it's very hard to keep them in mind by yourself. Even if you're a great game designer, you will not be able just to come up with all the things. And that's why this book is so great, because it can serve as a handbook for a game designer. You can just use this checklist to perfect your game design. It will not become ideal, nothing is, but these lenses, the ideas from the book, will help you eliminate all major flaws from your game design and make a really good, fair game design. Yes. Well, that's basically everything that I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention. You can feel free to ask questions. Thank you. So, do you have any questions so far?
So I have a question. What is the most important game design lenses do you think?
Okay, so the question is, what is the most important game design lens? And I can tell you that there is a lot of important lenses, because a game is a very complicated system, and if something is missing, it may not be playable. You can have, for example, a great plot, great characters, great gameplay, but just bad interface, and the players will not be able to enjoy this game because it's inconvenient.
What should you start with? So, for example, you're developing a game, and you're looking at first to concentrate on a few lenses, for example. So, what should you concentrate at the beginning?
Okay, so some lenses are applicable only for some specific kinds of games, so you should start from some more general lenses. You can find them in the book, and you can just pick some of them. When you read a book, you're already acquainted with them, and you know which places are weak in your game, And you can like read the book and follow the questions and answers to discover what exactly is weak and fix it. Okay? Anyone else?
Have you tried implementing some of those lenses?
I tried them, but not in computer games, but when I was mastering the D&D campaign. They really work. They really work very good. Because like they save you from a lot of pain. Because this topic, game design, is not some strictly technical topic. It's very vague. It's connected to human psychology. So when you have just a checklist which can help you to improve your game, it's amazing.
So you choose three random lenses from the book?
Yes, I picked 300 lenses and applied them to games, showing good examples and bad examples, proving why these lenses are important. Did I persuade you? Thank you. Yay, anyone else? No? We can proceed to the next presentation maybe? Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Anton Skudarnov, if you don't know me. And today I want to talk about one topic. It's about fascinating games that once of the time disappointed me. And maybe the first thing that, let me from the beginning start that there will be some kind of spoilers. So it's your problem if you listen me right now, so sorry for that. There are not so much spoilers, but one of them really big, so sorry if you don't play these games, but it's your problems. Okay, let's continue. Maybe you, first of all, you think about that I will tell you about something like this. Yes? That's the first thing that you think, Battlefront 2, loot boxes and other stuff, but actually not. Today I just want to tell you how to disappoint your player and at the same time he likes it. First of all, let's start from the definition. What is the game actually in case of video games? And we can say that the game consists of some small part of pieces. And for example, I can divide it from like gameplay, because the gameplay is very important. We play the game, right? And we want to understand how to communicate with the players through the gameplay. And the next thing is kind of visual. We want to, the 90% of information that we get, it's from our eyes, and the beautiful picture, it's very important for us, like for the players. Sounds, of course, is too important. We, with the PC games, we can, or just in general video games, there is only our feeling how we touch the keyboard or gamepad, and also the sounds. It's important because it gives us kind of characteristic of the game, how to play, and what is the emotion we should to feel when we play it. The next is kind of the story. It's the same. It's about the feelings. It's about the interesting how to play this game and what is this about. And maybe I include here some of the things like platform, because platform it's about the touching. Sometimes when you play the telephone, it's the one feeling. When you need just 15 minutes to play, it's one of the day. For example, for Clash of Clans, take some. You use some stuffs in your game, and after that you throw it. But for the PC, for example, the gameplay session is usually very long. It started from a few hours. The same for the consoles. So it's very important. In general, you can divide all of these things by your own. Maybe you find some additional things. Maybe you make it less. For example, you can explain the platforms field. But in general, the main idea that all of these things, it's about what is the idea of our game and what is the game about actually. And why we need this definition of idea in the game? Because when we like a developer want to develop a game, we just started from the idea, right? For example, I want to create a mobile game about 6x6 players, something like that. And then you started to develop your game and understand what is your gameplay, what video do you have, what's the visual style, what's the sound style, and all other stuffs. But let me share with you some of the game development science. The idea is something that affects your player, actually. And let me start from the example. Who knows these games? Who plays this one? Okay, most of you guys. And could you please someone share what do you feel when you play this game? It's kind of a cool feeling when you kill the all monsters and you feel yourself really cool that you can do it. Even it doesn't matter what is the difficulty, right? If you have a high difficulty in the game, so you even will feel yourself more cool than you on easy level, for example. Some simple example, Super Mario Brothers. What do you feel? Actually, for me, it's kind of the challenging game because there is no checkpoints, there is no save points or something like that. And so it's you have only limited number of lives, and the only thing that you can do is just go through the game, find the old secrets as fast as is possible. That's the only thing. Another game, Tetris. It's about how to good your reaction, your logic, how you're smart. You feel yourself very smart if you complete the Tetris game very good, right? And what I can say here, so maybe game is about the fun, right? But actually I want to put the question mark here. Is it really only about the fun? Actually not. This is one of the example. It's Armored Kitten. It's a game was developed by the Russian developer. It's about the kitty who actually was to send to the Mars to understand what happens in the laboratory in the Mars, and he has an armor and guns. He's very sweet and dangerous. And your task is just to kill the monsters, find the bombs, cards, road with the robot, and all other different stuffs. The gameplay is very simple, really. It actually was published not only the mobile platforms, but also on Steam. And I just want to share you one of my experiences with this game after a few hours. I just decided that I want to buy a really cool gun, but I had to, sometime I had to replay the level because it was not possible to me to go through it. But when I actually collect the all money for this gun, the gameplay started to be like this. Yeah, don't panic and go right. This is the tint from the game. And this is visualization of that. You can say that's ugly, actually. It's not a game, really. It's, you know, about 15 levels I played like this. I played it, really. I complete this game. And you know why? Because it was kind of the relaxation for me. Because I didn't spend so much time in like AAA games, and it was kind of fun for me because just to put two buttons and play all the game like with two push buttons. And the beautiful pictures also was good kind of stuff for me. So game is a relaxation, maybe, yes, but maybe actually not. You all know these games. Dark Souls, right? When the skeleton kick your ass out in the pit and you're dying. Or the skeleton decided that you are not fair, the good animation, and so, because there are a lot of skeletons, they just kill you and don't allow you just to hit them. Or another example, when the enemy even don't notice you, he just kill you because he's turning around, right? Or when the furniture kill you. This is a game about the pain. This is the game about how to die. So, is it the game should be painful? Another example. It's Horizon Zero Dawn, actually, game for PlayStation 4. And when I actually started to play this game, I choose the very hard difficulty level. And at the one moment of the time, I go to the checkpoint, and there was a spawn point for the enemies. And the 30 times I tried to kill them. It was very frustrated. I choose the level very easy, kill these fucking bastards, and choose the normal level difficulty. And started from this moment, I started to play the game, actually, because before that, I just killed the enemy each time when I meted them. That was painful. So the game is pain. Maybe yes. But let me show the example, which was kind of the idea of all of this lecture and topic. It's Ori and the Blind Forest. I really like this game. I really appreciate how the developer creates this game. But This was the game that disappointed me. The Ori is the game about the forest, about the. This is actually a spirit tree, and the story is about how the spirit tree loses her child Ori, and the spirit tree is actually has a heart. You can see it on the top of the tree, and it happens that the tree loses her heart. And the Ori tried to find it, and in the process of finding, he understands that there is a Kuro. It's the main protagonist, main enemy of the Ori. And the Kuro wanted she actually stole the heart, and Ori tried to find them. Of course, Kuro don't want it because some reasons. And during the story, you're just trying to understand what is the reason why the Kuro wanted to do it. But the main important thing, Ori actually is a creature of light, you can see. And, but this old Kuro is actually a creature of dark. The spirit tree is creature of light. But there is also another creature of dark, it's a Gumo. Gumo is just like Gumanoid character, who is actually dark side. But one of the time he did bad things, but the Ori saved him in mind when he was stuck by stones, and right after this moment, Gumo started to help Ori to find the heart. But there's also Nami. I don't remember. Sorry. It's actually the mother for Ori. When the Ori was losing, she helps Ori and helps him grow. So it's a kind of dark creature, but actually she is very kind. And the question is, does dark mean the bad? How do you think? Is it? I think you can't see anything, right? Okay, there is a small, cute owls on the picture. And I don't think that you can say that's very bad because it's just they dark creatures. But in this one moment of the time, actually, the Ori found out the nest of the Kuro. And she found out one egg. And the developer showed us this video. Let me share it with you. I think it sounds it's important, so give me 1 minute, please. Okay. Is it possible to see actually? No? Yes or no? Could you see it? Okay. So Kuro has had actually children. He was searching the food for them, and once a time when Spirit Tree lose the Ori, the tree decided that she want to call the Ori from the forest, and she made kind of the flash of the light, and this light spreads to the nest of the Kuro, and you can see what actually happens. The owls really fear this light, just because they're creatures of darkness, but not of the light. The Kuro understands that something bad happens, but the Kuro is adult owl, not a small one, not a child. And because of the light, because of they are very weak, they just got a few days birds, they successfully died. And there remains only one egg. Of course, Kuro understands that because of the trees, her children was dead. And she decided to steal the heart, just because she wanted to save her last egg. This was the key point when the player understands the main motivation of protagonist. And it's not a bad motivation, because the Creatures of Dark, as we can see, it's not only about the bad things. And this is the moment of the time when you started to to be sad because you play for the kind of the good creature light, but in the same time you just think that maybe it's not so good to be a light creature because they did bad things actually. And then at the end you can see what actually happened at the end of the game when the Ori actually finds the heart. And I want to show it in the same time the emotion of gamers who played this scene. Let me just move it a little bit.
No, I never played Spider-Man. I told you not to be mad at me. You're not be mad at me. The spirit tree, so close, and you're only so left. That was really cool. That whole last part of there is really, really cool. It was worth it. It was worth the stress. Hi, critters! Where's the lens? We're gonna keep up, babe. The spirit tree is near. There's one step more to take. Force of nibble will live once again. Critters, how to pleasure you. How to pleasure you.
Developers actually often try to feel, make the player feel some dangerous and angry in the same time.
That didn't just happen, right? Please tell me that didn't just happen. That did not just happen. I'm going, my chest. I'm gonna cry. Wait, I have to control? This is rude. Why do I have to do this?
You can see actually the heart and the crawl of the Kuro. And at this moment we understand that the Kuro is angry just because of her children again, and she decided that she understands actually that her ex will be fired, and she sees the love that has the Ori and Nami. Maybe maybe the key decision was about the egg, not about the Ori, but in general we can see that she understands why actually the Ori wanted to save the forest. And just because of the very strong light, the Kuro actually was dead. Since Kuro was dead, the ex was saved actually. But in general, this was kind of frustrating moment when you understand that the really dark character was actually very light inside her. And you can see the emotion of the player when she's really sad, no, but this question is not about the sad. She understands that maybe like a player you choose the wrong side just because maybe it was not so obligatory to save the old forest because the old creatures live actually very good. Again, the forest creatures was lived again, and that's very good, but the eggs was saved actually. And the actually next part was about how the bird from the saved was have a friendship with the Ori. But what I actually want to say here, you can see that it gives us some negative emotions, right? So is it game is about sad? Actually not. Games is about, in general, it's about emotions. And here I want to put exclamational mark. Remember that. And make your player feel, and not only positive actually. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions? Sorry? What's fire? What? I don't remember exactly, but I think yeah, it's actually was kind of the Ori actually, because he tries to find out the herd in the process of searching. He tripped to the mountain, to the volcano mountain, and he just make some things because of the lava, and because the spirit tree was actually dead. Because of that, the forest was in fire. So yeah, Ori, for me, Ori is not a positive character totally. Anything else? Good, thank you again. The next speaker. Yeah, we have a break right now. Actually, you have like 10 or 15 minutes, right, to have a small rest.
Hi guys. The talk, as it is advertised in the program, is called Cross-Platform Development Hacks, but the actual name is Cross-Platform Development with Hacks. It was actually misheard and misinterpreted by the organizers, but I have decided to let it be just for the sake of this fun, because I'm not here today to talk to you about Unity or Unreal Engine, because that would be just too easy for you, right? So to get started, the notion of cross-platform development became really popular in the recent years, and actually no one right now, like almost no one develops something just for one platform. There are games like exclusively for PS4, for example, but that's just usually not very common. And in the most recent years, we actually need to develop the same applications and games both for mobile and for the web, and this is what this talk is going to be about. And usually there are like two sides of things. We either need to write some native code and run it on a device and on the web. You guys know how to compile C++ for the web, right? No? Well, the thing is, we write the C++ code or somehow generate C++ code and compile it via the LLVM to the WebAssembly. And there is a thing called ISMJS that allows us to run C and C++ code on the web. And that's one way to do it. So we write some native code that runs performantly on mobiles and then try to somehow compile it to the web. Or we can go the other way around and develop our app or a game initially with JavaScript and run it as a JavaScript app on a device using some things like Cordova, React Native, or Ionic. And this is actually the most popular way of developing apps recently, like Slack, Discord, Skype apps are developed this way, and this is actually not the very efficient way, as you might expect, because JavaScript is far from being native for the mobile, so we have to have some kind of a web browser on the device. So if we take the native code on the web path, we get very highly effective code that runs on mobile, but it just outputs too much overhead for our web builds. And for example, Unity, if you just take an empty scene and compile it to the WebGL build, it will contain around 4.5 megabytes of overhead just for the empty scene. The default is even worse than that. It outputs somewhere around 6 megabytes. And you might think, like, 6 megabytes is not too much, right? But actually a lot of web platforms for game exchanging and like games for instant messaging apps have a requirement of maximum of 5 megabytes for the entire game. So you haven't even began implementing your game, and you are already out of the memory that was provided for you. So this is not actually the way to go for the like smaller games. But there is a JavaScript world, right? We know how to build JavaScript games, and it's actually pretty easy because like the most popular language on GitHub, guess what? JavaScript. Yes, it's 25% of all the repositories, and like every day some new JavaScript framework comes out. There is even a site on the web, like days since last JavaScript framework. So it's a very popular approach to building games. And there is a thing called Pixie.js. It's a tiny framework for building 2D games, and its overhead is around 400 kilobytes uncompressed size. So take that, 6 megabytes compressed versus 400 kilobytes uncompressed, which actually after compression becomes like something around 30 kilobytes. And it's all good and runs on the web natively, but what about mobile? As you might have guessed, it has lower performance and poor support, like older devices don't even support that altogether. And depending on the build type, you might have somewhere around 18 megabytes to 80 megabytes easily, just like that. So you either use a built-in web app view on a device, which allows you to save some megabytes. But if you decide to ship with a Chromium, like with Ionic, that thing, it actually bundles an entire browser into your app. It becomes like 80 megabytes, and Google Play has a hard limit of 100 megabytes for the initial APK. So you have like around 20 megabytes to fit your main game content there, so all your code. And of course you can split the app, but 20 megabytes for the core is pretty low too. But can't we just go both native on mobile and native on web? Like, we need to run C++ on the device and run JavaScript on the web without compromising any of the performance or without having all those limitations. And there is actually one thing that does just that, and it's called Hex. It's not a high-level framework, it's actually a cross-platform toolkit which consists of a meta-programming language which doesn't compile to anything directly. Like until recently it wasn't even able to run on itself. It required translation to different languages and then running it on a target platform. And it actually transpiles, like you take your Hex code and transpile it to C++ or to JavaScript, and you can run almost the same code on all those platforms. But we are interested in C++ and HTML5, JavaScript targets. So writing the same code and then transpiling it to C++, it's some kind of a managed C++ with a garbage collector. It's actually the same garbage collector that Unity uses on its IL2CTP builds. And we can take that same code and compile it to JavaScript, and won't have all that overhead of converting C++ to JavaScript. We compile to JavaScript directly. A bit of syntax. I won't go into detail for this because there is a lot of info and a lot of talks on Hex which cover these topics. It's actually somewhere between ECMAScript 6, ActionScript, and some bits of Python. So looks like ActionScript or C#, just a generic language. And there is actually a ton of frameworks built with Hex, because Hex is very good for building your own stuff on top of it. And there is Stencil is a very popular game engine for making games without coding. There are like low-level graphics API wrappers, and Hexpixel is actually very popular. People tend to make games for the jams with it. But it's not enough, because you can actually make your own, and this is what Hex developers usually do. They create their own in-house tools with it, because it's a low-level framework that allows you to build it. And the author of Lux actually did all that, and I checked the code, and it's actually very cool. And it's all cool, right? But what about games that are made with it? The Papers, Please game is one of the most important and popular ones. When people talk about hacks, they usually show this game first, because it was like the most popular of all of them. It's a game about a guy who checks the documents and decides whether to grant a person a pass or not. But there are also more recent games like Avalanche, and they have actually created Avalanche 2 using the same framework that they have built the first version of the game with. And this game is enormous in terms of content. It's actually not very trivial to build something like that in Unreal or Unity, and they have built this thing like in no time using those custom in-house tools. And the most recent ones I have found is Northgard is a very quite popular recent game, and it's highly critically acclaimed on Steam. It's a 3D Viking strategy game, and one of my favorite games. Like, I've been playing and enjoying this game even before I knew it was made in Hex. It's some kind of a pixel art / 3D game. It's not real pixel art. If you looked at the animations directly, you can see that it actually converts 3D models to the pixel art appearance, and it's actually very good and pretty unique in its mechanics. But I hope to see some of your titles here soon, or at least I hope you check out the hacks and toolkit and all that comes with it, at least. Thanks. Are there any questions?
How to make a toolkit? I mean, using this hacks toolkit, how to make something that converts, let's say, this basic.js code to whatever?
Can you repeat the last part? To Pixie.js. Yes, I've talked to a guy who actually worked on a Flambe engine, and the guy who worked on that engine actually deprecated it. It doesn't support it anymore. And that guy, he actually wrote an article how they have built a framework on top of the Pixie.js, so they actually don't compile it to mobile. Their primary target is web. So they write all their web games in Hex and convert it to JavaScript with Pixie.js bindings. So they actually work with Pixie.js directly, because it's actually as far as I know, the fastest rendering WebGL rendering engine for 2D games. And they actually managed to make somewhere around 40 games a year, something like that, for the Nickelodeon or something. So you actually write bindings in JavaScript for their hacks and compile your hacks to JavaScript, and they connect to the natively written code. So it's completely possible. And the Lux, the guy who made Lux, actually made some SDL, the Simple Direct library for C++. It's a cross-platform C++ library. He made some bindings for that and uses that for window management and all that sort of stuff.
So I just take the initial framework or something like Pixie.js and create license for hacks.
Can you repeat?
What's the general algorithm to making that? I just take the Pixie.js of this framework and I create bindings for hacks, and that's how it works.
So the question, just to repeat for the recording, how to approach working with some native things like Pixie.js using Hex. And the process is that you take some native JavaScript code, write some bindings for it, and write some code in Hex that gets compiled and knows about that there is a thing called Pixie. and you actually talk to the Pixie directly using hex code. So yeah, you're writing some really simple wrappers, and you can talk to the external code without that overhead of like if you have runtime interoperability between C# and C++, like we have in Unity. It has some overhead because it needs to switch unmanaged and managed context. In Hex, if you compile it directly to C++, you don't have that overhead of switching context, so it may save you some time and overhead. Any more questions? No? Cool. Thank you.
One, two, does it work? Okay. Okay, my name is Wilhelm, and today I will talk about inverse kinematics. And mostly I will talk about what is it, how does it work, and why perhaps we should use it. Let's start from the agenda. Yeah, first is we'll state the problem, what is main, not complexity, but what's the main obstacle and why do we need this. We'll state what is IK in surfacely. We'll not go into the through this into details, like not too many science, rocket science, linear algebra, and so on. Next thing we'll look on the basic principles. How does it work, all step by step. And we'll talk about pros and cons for IK, and oh wait, okay, it should be some examples. Okay, anyway, about the problem, we actually okay. To state the problem, I will not tell you what is IK's like long, boring term, but instead, let's just look at this picture. What we have here is the legs of our NPC is right through their slope, and what we want to achieve is this one. Okay. Let's start from the thesaurus. To understand what is IK, we'll talk about its components. It's like duct taping. If it has joints, like these little points where you have some degrees of freedom, you have bones. Next, you have inverse kinematics chain is actually a combination and mix of joints and bones, ordered one. And we have the end effector. The right two ones are most important for IK, let's say, since we will work only with end effector and IK as one, not with separate joints or bones, etc. Okay, let's talk about firstly about forward kinematics. How does it work? Actually, we have all our bones and joints, and for an exact keyframe, we have all the parameters set, like turn this joint like 50 degrees X, and so on, so on, so on. For the inverse kinematics, our end goal is just putting the keyframe for end effector, and all other work is done for us. Okay, let's talk about high level. First one thing is that IK. First one is that IK actually tries to work with all the parents of the child. Like we have the end effector, and then it goes up and up and up. And this is the main idea of inverse kinematics. We're just trying to provide the meaningful and adequate posture for our model. We'll start from the chain setup. Next, we'll have some end effector scheme frame, like putting the button, having a step, and so on and so on. Next, we should have inverse kinematic solver. Sorry for sound. And to get the result. Pretty simple, huh? But what's about underneath? First, we should understand our initial constraints and all the input data. For example, we have our model and it should just be punching something. We have certain degrees of freedom, like 6 of them, like X, Y, Z, all the row, yo, and so. And for initial data, we have our initial position and our end position. The main thing of IK solver is to solve linear equations. What I mean this in here as we have our 2 keyframes, the initial position and the end one, and all of the joints and bones are going to be the parameters for the linear equations. We'll not dig into this too much, but you should know this happen. Yeah, we have certain constraints, like for degrees of freedom, maybe for some rotations and so on. And we have, yeah, as I say, well, if you wanted to some linear algebra, here's it. You can read it, and etc., etc., etc. But until I need some, how to say, this tiny settings and so on, I'm not going to go into the mathematics at all, because I'm okay with having all my techniques for 3D animation. So if you want, there is links just in this picture and so on, so you can dig it. We'll actually have these pros and cons. For the benefits of the procedural generation is actually procedural generation, you know. You'll have less time spending less time on creating your animation. Next thing is you can easily work with it, but just once you have set it up, all the things like IK solver, constraints, etc. What I mean by this is you just put in your keyframes, the end ones, and the animation is done. Good. And for robotics, we can solve unsolvable things for forward kinematics, like better to draw it. Добре. Yeah. For example, we have one initial joint. It's a top-down view. And here we have some manipulators. This one is common for both IK chains. In forward kinematics, we hardly can work this thing out since we have one thing, this particular joint in common. But however, inverse kinematics allows us to do such things in this. Yeah, as I said, we have 2 main areas where inverse kinematics is used. Is robotics. Yeah, we have people here from robotics that could tell us if they want a bit more. And we have 3D animation pipelines. But what about more concrete examples of inverse kinematics in game dev? First one is Fabric, forward and backward reaching inverse kinematics. What's mean is we have actually both forward kinematics animation and inverse kinematics ones. And the idea of Fabric, as I understand it, is kind of blending between the animations. Let's say that. Yeah, another good approach is actually weighted least square equations. This one applies to numerical approaches of some kind of mathematical optimization. By the way, I just didn't say that we have two types of approaches, analytical and numerical ones. Analytical allows us to somehow understand our final formula for the exact parameters, for exact degrees of freedom, constraints, and our mesh like bones and joints. While the numerical approach allows us to iteratively understand the answer for their equations. Yeah, this one will be, this lecture is over. Please, if you have any question, but I doubt it, because it was too short, firstly. However, I'd like to... Текст. А где там? Ага. Пуру. А, стой. Что я делаю? Так, брать внутрь.
Открывай там экране.
Так, погоди, там разве нельзя сделать вот так вот?
Чуть дальше. Да, там что-то не видит второго экрана.
Так, сейчас погоди.
Давай перетащим просто.
Сейчас заметки хочу сделать. Где заметки?
Заметки вот здесь, смотреть снизу. Заметки.
Язык?
Да.
Вот там, соответственно, ага.
Да, это там перетащим.
Да, блин. Yeah, okay, as I said, my name is Wilhelm and this is Realism in Games. First thing, it's Peggy 16, so please, if you're under this age, please leave, or otherwise I don't answer for anything, I'm not responsible for you killing others. Let's start from the agenda once again. We'll define what is realism, again, step by step, etc., etc. We'll talk about why and why should we use realism in our games and why we shouldn't. Next thing, I will give you some of the good, the bad, and the ugly examples of using or not using say, realism in games. And then I will tell you a little secret. Okay. Well, what is realism? Actually, it's a question for our audience. I'll give you a second. Okay, time's up, please. Anyone, any volunteers? What is realism? All right. Lifeline. What do you mean by lifeline?
It means what we can see in real life.
Okay. Something else? What else? Please, Igor. What is realism? Not in games, but in general.
Realism is a matter of how it flows to life.
You mean the measure of close to reality?
Yeah, to my mind, it's how close to reality. How much? Probably realistic physics, behavior, history, like that.
Okay, we have nice answers here, but what my friend Hegel thinks about it. Truth is a philosophical mean. Truth in philosophy means that concept and external reality corresponds. While applying this to game development, we can say that realism is when world answers our expectations. Yeah. But wait. Ben, had anyone expected this apple on the Hegel's face? No, I don't think so. However, this is real. I've just put the pixel art apple on the Hegel's portrait in the name of postmodernism. So we can this situation lead us to another point. World firstly follows the fundamental laws before answering our expectations about it. Okay. Well, it's nice, but let us define a bit more precisely what is realism. As I think, we have a set of rules and/or constraints for, firstly, the world, like all the electricity and magnetic stuff, all the speeds, mass, etc., etc. We have our creations or objects or props inside this world, like apple will fall, or tyrant will rise, and so on and so on. And the other thing is we have our creators. If they do exist or they don't, we don't care. However, they follow the rules like world and our objects. The example, if some lucky god or Odin god created some world and then they did nothing, just watching and listening all the stuff happening in this world. Yeah, and the first one. But here comes the second. We have proximate causation, or we can say this as interconnection. And in other words, it's one action or a set of parameters inevitably results in the others. We have, for example, this bottle here, and a bit, well, maybe half an hour, and it will be warmer. Just like this. Yep, what is next? Yeah, why shouldn't we actually use, well, I'll talk about in reverse manner, why shouldn't we use in realism in games? The one simple answer is that we don't always want to be in real life. Sometimes we want to explore, etc., etc. So maybe it's not the best approach. But it's just one of the main reasons. Let's talk about others. Yeah, we can't have an appropriate genre. For example, maybe puzzle game will not be so interesting for in realistic manner. We can have platform, how to say, wrong cognition, like mobile platforms will hardly support the graphics level of the personal computers. We can have actually specific target auditory, like not all the 6-year-olds men and women will understand the reality as it should be. Yeah, and reality can be not fun. Just remember Armor, when you can just work 2 hours, real hours, just to reach the point? Well, it's not really fun. The last one is wrong atmosphere. As I've said, for example, imagine Ori and the Blind Forest in a realistic way, like, well, what? Because there's no magic, you know. Maybe no magic, but there is some old spirits and so on, so no, it doesn't work though. Okay, but why should we use realism in our games? The first thing is, in reality, we have all these expectations. So while you're using realism in your game, you have created the rules, just all the understandable rules. Second thing is that since it already works in our real world, you shouldn't, well, you cannot provide the players with some tutorials, since you already know that this is a chair, you can sit on them. And this is a table, you can sit on them on this too. Yeah, we have believing in the world means role playing. For example, we have we have civilization games, like you can role play in a real or kind of historical alternative scenario. Next thing is this kind of simulation. Maybe it's not applies only to games, but it can be useful as well. There we should have a realism. And of course we can have technical showcases. So if you want to just demonstrate new ray tracing in Unreal Engine, it's a good way to make it in a realistic way, you know. Something else, maybe some people here just want to add, or maybe those people want to add. Anyone?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. And okay, it's the good. From the good, the bad, and the ugly. What I mean by the good is we can have realism or not realism in games, and it was a good decision. Well, being a Star Wars game, I will start from Star Wars games. Or being a Star Wars fan, I will start from Star Wars games. Right? Yeah, it's better. Actually, I'm glad that our world's physics is not applied in Star Wars. If it will be, well, we'll have tons of corpses, like burnt ones, since having such energy in your hand will actually burn everything in 50 meters, I suppose. Okay. One good example is Rising Storm 2 Vietnam. The first time I've just played this game, I've actually shot half of my own team. And maybe, well, I was too afraid that someone can kill me, so I shot it first, while they didn't see me. Apparently they were my teamwork, not my foes. And this is the real thing that can happen in real world, you know. You shoot first because you just don't understand if it's your foe or ally, and you shoot it. That's it. Total War series have our fatigue and morale parameters that are really important for strategy and war. For example, in all games, all RTS, real-time strategy games, we had these cavalry units can just running all the map through without even without even some rest or something. In real life, it would be we'll slowly walk all the tons of kilometers, and right before the fight, when we have about 100 meters, we would rush and charge to the enemy. Okay. Next is Sniper Elite 4. And here I have a small hint for myself. Actually, I want to drink. A second. Yeah. Here. While seeing actually the damage you've done to the enemy, that can be entertaining. Also, bullet physics. Understanding how bullet physics works and trying to shoot it like in real life can be interesting as well. The next thing is actually all the FIFA games, all the sport games. Why do people play this game? They want to feel all this World Cup Championship, blah 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 blah, and it should feel real. It should immerse for the players. So maybe most of the sport games will look cooler, or it won't be a wrong choice to use realism in those games. However, it's not only about looks. It's about complexity, gameplay, and mechanics as well. For example, in Dirt series, we have this kind of realistic automobiles controls, since one wrong turn and you're over for this race. Okay, let's talk about the bad examples. What I mean by the bad examples, again, is they applied the realism or not applied the realism, and it was a bad decision. Yeah, about sports games, NBA in 15 year tried to face recognition, I suppose, and well, not all the examples are the best ones. Oh dear. Okay, the one game I actually love is Mass Effect 3. But however, I didn't like this guy, James Vega, I suppose. I don't really remember him. Well, Vega is. What's wrong here is we have kind of world collapse, we have a complete destruction, and these guys decide to make a tattoo. By the way, from the NBA player making it for him. It's not unrealistic too, but it wasn't pleasant enough. Okay, what about, well, yeah, enough jokes. Let's talk about serious stuff. This one. I don't have words to describe what the game designers or level designers thought about, because no one, well, mostly no one put this on, well, the toilet paper this way. I understand in USA there is imperial metrics, US dollars and so on, but this I don't understand actually. Okay, once again, let's stop the jokes. Imagine any fighting game with some final blow, and there'll be just complete silence, no sound, like crunch, no crunch sound. For example, like this. And start. Well, you get it. Well, it won't be too bad for a realistic fight, but maybe it's not the best choice for the game. Why doesn't it work? Yeah, I'm not sure if you see this. Well, let me see this first. Well, from the left side we have Fable: The Lost Chapters, and from the right side we have Fable Anniversary. The gameplays of these games are identical, since one was just a remaster. However, graphics made in Fable Anniversary, graphics made me feel like I'm in this game, not in the fairy tales of Fable. So maybe it's not the best example of how to put a bit more realism in games. Yeah, and about realism, despite of gameplay or mechanics, you can have one single dialogue line or many of them that can ruin your immersion or interest in play. Like we have here, okay, ninjas has kidnapped the president. Are you bad enough to rescue him? No. And yeah, we have actually Skyrim here as well, and there's a great quote from the, well, Half of Guards, I suppose. I used to be an adventurer like you, and I took an arrow in the knee. Well, it can be hilarious enough as a meme in first place. Whether when we talk about players immersion, actually, I had a feeling when I heard this from 1 and 2 guards. I thought I was in a sandbox, not in kind of Nordic, tough nature place or something. So we didn't see this. We didn't see this in the previous The Elder Scrolls series games. However, this one, maybe they tried to maybe add some jokes and get more atmospheric, but this one not completely oriented, but made it a bit less immersive. And let's talk about the ugly games. It's not about graphics, it's not about the games will be unplayable. However, these games can apply realism or not apply realism, and it will be okay in terms of reality, but it will be awful in terms of gameplay. Let's start. Imagine any space game without a single sound, like we are in an outer space. Like, you see, yeah? Not very interesting. Actually, the Sins of Solomon tried this, and they said that, yeah, guys, we want to bring you some realism, but when we play tested it, it was just so boring with no sounds, so we cancelled this idea. The second thing is the Deadliest Warrior. From the left you have some Spartan Warrior, and from the right you have some Pirate Captain. What is this? Is actually kind of realistic fighting, since one javelin shot and the man is dead. Well, it's true. If you get some spear in your chest, you'll probably be dead in most of the cases. Whether it's a fighting game, and maybe it's not the best choice to put there some realism here. One of my favorite themes. Why should we apply or not apply realistic shooting in modern FPS games? This one demonstrates how tentatively we should anything. Blur everywhere. We focus our sight on the front sides. So this is what kind of right way of shooting. And imagine this picture, but with your hands. Just please put your hands like this, both of it. Do you see? Your gun is not that big, you know? It's a bit smaller. So in games, we mostly have this understanding of the bigger gun, the better. But it's actually completely wrong. So the smaller guns are lighter, they are more, not interesting, but more comfortable to use, etc., etc. And about a little secret. Despite of game rarely can be named realistic. There are too few cases when games have nothing from our real world. What I mean by this, it's just printed out. Most of the games have something from reality some way. Just example, a game where gravity depends on some exchange parameters from real world, like USD euro rate, or something randomly change the colors for your color tones. So I guess this is it, and that's all, folks. If you have any question, please.
What's wrong with the toilet paper? What's wrong with the toilet paper in Fallout?
What?
What's wrong with the toilet paper in Fallout?
I think you're a pervert. Because maybe not no one, but most of the Homo sapiens sapiens use this paper not like to the wall side, well, like this particular shit, but to the other side, you know?
But it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Hmm?
Yes,
It doesn't matter.
there's no difference.
God, help me, please. What are these people? Okay. Okay. Something else?
Have you seen Kingdom Come Deliverance?
Yep.
What do you think about realism? Is it bad or good category? Or?
Smell of manliness. I mean, it has like school classics, sword fighting, where the RPG says that it's RPG, it's not a realistic hardcore game that it maybe used to be. So it just, they made it good. We have very positive on Steam and so on and so on. So maybe they found their, not a niche, but their gold mean.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was about Kingdom Come Deliverance and if they did it good in terms of realism. Yeah. Well, I guess that's all.